Hey guys, this is Meredith with Madam Diesel, and today we've got a new engine on the workbench, or it's going to be on the workbench. I'm going to get this thing loaded up and we'll take a look at it. Alright guys, so one of the first things I do once I get a new engine on the bench is I do a quick walk around and kind of gauge what I'm looking at, what needs done, at least from the outside, and we'll take a good hard look at this thing. So, like I said, Yanmar 4JH, it is a 4-cylinder sailboat engine, so smaller guy, not tiny per se, but you'll see these engines on sailboats that are about 40-ish feet in length. So, you know, my 30-foot sailboat would have a 3-cylinder. This is the next bigger version. I believe this is about 50-ish horsepower. Don't quote me, 44 to 50 horsepower is typically where we see these non-turbocharged engines. And this one, I believe, has a number of hours on it. I can't quite remember the exact number. I'll have to get that down the road. But, you know, it's got some wear and tear. Now, the thing with a lot of sailboat engines is these engines suffer big time due to one major cause, and that is idling. Idling will carbon up these poor engines really, really bad. And a lot of sailors, they're afraid to run these engines hard, which is the absolute worst thing you can do to a diesel engine, as a lot of you may know, but some of you may not know. So if you're ever wanting to try to keep your diesel as happy as possible, run it hard. Run the snot out of these things. This particular engine, the current owner wants to go cruising with it. He's already taken the boat all over. You know, wants to continue doing so, and he just wants it to be healthy while he's doing it. Previous owners, however, we really don't know how they ran the engine, and that's kind of where the question marks came in. This engine had quite a bit of blow-by. It had, it was easy to start, so I imagine compression was halfway decent on it. However, there's oil coming out of several different places. And that certainly tells me, you know, like I remember pulling the oil cap off this thing when it ran. And that, you know, that tells me compression gases are getting where they don't belong. They're making their way down into the crankcase. Ever since, just in the few minutes that I put this thing on the table, we're already dripping oil out of a few places. So she's a leaky, squeaky engine. Not a big deal. We're going to fix all that, obviously. We're going to see some new gaskets. We may pull the reverse gear, or some of you refer to it, transmission. We may pull the reverse gear and send it out to be checked. I personally don't do a ton of reverse gear work, so if we do that, we'll be sending it to a local shop here in Washington to go through that and make sure that's good. As far as I know, it's been functioning normally, so most likely we will not really have to do much with that. This engine, one thing some of you sailors may notice is it's got aftermarket motor mounts, and that's pretty cool. I actually have these same motor mounts. These are Isoflex motor mounts. They are like a special polymer plastic, and then the rubber that they used as the actual motor mount cushion is oil resistant, so they hold up really well. These particular ones are a little bit stiffer than the stock Yanmar ones. Those of you who have Yanmar engines know that they come with really I don't want to say flimsy because they're not, but they're really soft motor mounts, and the engine will just vibrate itself to death. on the engine bed when idling. So these 4 cylinders tend to run a little bit more balanced. So that's not nearly an issue, but if you're looking for motor mounts, check out the Isoflex. They don't come looking like this anymore. They actually changed the design a bit, but it's the same concept. And these are a number of years old, but you know, they actually appear to have held up really decently. So no complaints there, honestly. Looking at the back of this thing, that's the oil cooler and the transmission cooler, the reverse gear cooler. So these hoses come off. Oil coolers for marine engines are fed with salt water from the heat exchanger. So the engine oil goes through a cooler, which is the top one, I believe. And then engine oil is the bottom one. Actually, no, I stand corrected. This is strictly a transmission cooler. The oil cooler looks like it's right here on this particular model. Some of the newer ones, you'll actually see this pretty much exact same setup with the 2 small heat exchangers. However, each heat exchanger has the lines coming off of it for both engine oil and transmission. So, looking at essentially the starboard side of the engine, we'll pull the dipstick. I believe he said he drained all the oil. Nothing dramatic here. This oil is pretty clean. He was pretty good at maintaining it. We just noted that this engine was a little bit tired. We're going to clean up the engine harness. Previous owners have been in here and had their way with it. Looks like, you know, this engine actually ran really smoothly. So I don't suspect any issues with the injection pump. No reason to send that out. Injection pumps, typically, these high pressure injection pumps, unless they suck up dirt or crud, they really don't have a lot of issues. They're susceptible to dirt and crud and algae and water and all the typical stuff. However, you know, these things can last years and years and years without any sort of maintenance on them, and they do just fine. So we'll make sure to keep that clean and happy, and obviously this thing will get new filters. Looks like he's been in and replaced fuel lines, so we're good there. The return lines look great. They're all brand new. I think he told me they were less than a year old, so we don't have to do that. He was good and covered up, you know, his fuel stuff. I like using aluminum foil just to keep any fuel inlets clean. One thing that I look at when I'm inspecting these engines is the coolant hoses and the saltwater hoses. So I know this hose is original because it's painted silver. And this hose is like crunchy. It's like rock hard. So I instantly know that has never been changed. We are going to change these hoses, of course, because they are 20 plus years old. I think they're actually approaching 30. I believe this was like an early 90s engine. You know, just so we're safe. Looks like somebody, no, that's original. That thing's also like, I mean, these are rock hard. I can't even squeeze them. They're so tight. Those of you not familiar with marine engines might be wondering what this pump is for. This is called a raw water pump. And sorry, the electrical harness is in the way. But this raw water pump, what it does is it sucks up seawater from the outside of the hull. And it pumps it up through this hose under here and in through the heat exchangers, in through the oil coolers, and then eventually to the main engine heat exchanger, which is missing right now. We pulled that earlier. And this essentially is the radiator to the engine. So unlike, similar to your car, but different in a sense that this is called liquid to liquid heat exchanging versus your car's radiator, which is air to liquid. So this uses cold seawater, in our case salt water, to cool the coolant. So this manifold is essentially 3-in-1. It's a coolant reservoir, it's the heat exchanger housing, and it's the exhaust manifold. So the exhaust manifold comes out right here, and normally there'd be a big exhaust elbow sticking out. And these heat exchangers work really, really well because we are dealing with, 45, 50 degree seawater here in Puget Sound. So they actually do a really good job. These heat exchanger cores, and I'll go get one to show you, these heat exchanger cores last a long time. Yanmar does a really good job. They use very high quality materials, and they're made of copper nickel, and you can get years and years out of them without having to do anything, short of cleaning them and checking them once in a while. But eventually with the seawater and potentially rusty coolant, if people haven't been changing their coolant, they can corrode through and get pinholes in them, allowing seawater to now make it into the engine block, which is a big deal. So here's an example of a heat exchanger like this engine would have. This one actually came out of a 3GM30F. But it literally looks identical. The heat exchangers that come out of here are a little bit longer, a little bit wider, and have more tubes going through them. So the way these work is they are surrounded by coolant, engine coolant, and then seawater travels through these holes. I don't know if you can see through these holes, but they just pass directly through. And through thermodynamic heat exchange, the seawater pulls the heat away from the coolant, and the coolant can re-enter the engine and function. So on an engine like this would normally just slide in. You can see this one's not the right one. This is just an old one that I had laying around. But you can't check these. I mean, you can certainly check them for being clogged with crud or, pieces of impeller or something. But you can't check them for pinholes just by looking at them. So what you do with these is you send these out to like a radiator shop, and they will pressure test this. And they'll be able to tell us right away exactly which tube is leaking and potentially either block it off, repair it. Depending on the cost of a new one, sometimes it's worth just buying a whole new heat exchanger. Sometimes it's not. But anytime we've got the coolant drained, Yanmar, most manufacturers call for checking this type of stuff, whether it be, oil cooler heat exchangers, or your regular engine coolant heat exchanger, or whatever else. They want these checked every 5 to 7 years or 1,500-ish hours. It's not dead accurate, but it's about the average for most of the engines that I deal with. So we sent that out. The owner's going to take that up himself, so that's why we're missing. I'm going to get this manifold off. As you can see, despite being an aluminum manifold, this thing's kind of rusty crusty in places. So we're going to take that off and clean that up real good. The top of the engine looks decent. More original hoses. Here's the front end of that reservoir. And you can see down in that reservoir that coolant actually goes all the way down into the exhaust manifold. And the reason for that is this engine typically is tightly packed into a small engine compartment. And you wouldn't want a 500 degree exhaust manifold next to fiberglass or insulation or wiring or whatever else. And so they put a water jacket around this manifold to keep it not cool to the touch, but certainly not enough to burn anything down. So that's the story with that. That, of course, is coming off and getting cleaned up because that is a really critical component. Looking at anything else, not worried about rusty crusties. We're gonna clean all that up and paint it. The alternator is missing. Normally it'd go right in here. The water pump, this is our coolant pump. Unlike our seawater pump, our raw water pump, this guy is what actually turns the coolant. And she's got bad bearings, a little bit of play. So probably time for a new pump. I bet that thing's leaking underneath. Potentially hard to see with the camera. But when we pull that off, we'll take a good look. But you can actually hear this thing does not sound great. Looks like an old front main seal leak. It's wet with oil back there, kind of hard to see with the camera. So, and that's a result of that blow-by. I imagine there's also a rear main seal leak, so when I pull this reverse gear, we're going to do that rear main seal regardless, just because the engine is literally on a workbench, and it's easy to do. So, this side of the block actually looks, you know, other than cosmetics and stuff, it doesn't look bad. Air cleaner, a little oily. This is the crankcase vent that comes into the air cleaner, so you tend to see kind of an oily mess under here. Like, yeah, there's all kinds of oil under there. But other than that, she looks worthy of some love. So I'm pretty excited. Pretty excited to get this thing torn apart, I bet. I bet it's not nearly as bad as it seems. I'm really hoping that, you know, we can clean it up, put some piston rings and bearings in, and she'll last for another 40 years. So that's it for this video. I'll shoot another video maybe in a couple days when I have the time. This week has kind of been crazy. I've been running down quite a bit, and but I wanted to get these engines loaded up and on their tables. The other Yanmar over there on the counter, and so she's also ready. That owner is going to come tear into it with me as well, I think on Tuesday. So we're gonna have some fun engine teardown time, and we're gonna discover whatever's inside of these things, because they are certainly worthy of cleaning up and fixing. They're good engines. Yanmar does a good job with their marine diesel engines. So this is what I love to do, is fix these things and keep them going, because some of the new marinized engines are not what I would call impressive by any means. So anyways, hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.